All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're taking a deep dive into the 3 doors of liberation.
That's right.
And before you think, oh no, this is going to be some kind of philosophy lecture, I promise these doors, they're pathways, they're like a user's guide to mindfulness, and they're drawn from Buddhist teachings.
Yeah, and these teachings, they offer some very practical wisdom for dealing with, like, just life.
For sure, for sure. Everyday stuff. So, ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Door number 1, seeing clearly, or as it is known in Buddhist tradition, Animitta, which translates to signlessness. Okay,
Yeah.
hold me out here, because signlessness kind of sounds like a blank wall to me.
Well, it's a good analogy because Animitta is kind of like we're stripping away all the mental graffiti that we project onto the world. Like we see a tree, right?
Right.
Immediately our minds are just slapping all these labels on it. Oak tree, too big for the yard. I climbed one like this when I was a kid. Animitta is about experiencing that tree without all those judgments, just seeing it with fresh eyes.
Okay, so how do you hit the reset button on years of mental graffiti? That's got to be a huge project, right?
It is. It's a process just like learning any skill. There's a meditative state called Animitta samadhi that helps us develop this clear seeing. Think of it like cleaning a dirty window. You're not replacing the glass. You're just wiping away the grime so that you can see through it.
Ah, yeah, okay. I could see how that would be useful, especially now with everything being so, judgment heavy.
Total.
All right, what's behind door number 2? What are we looking at?
Okay, so this one is called apranihita, and it's all about letting go. Specifically, letting go of attachment to desires and outcomes.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
But I got to ask, I'm an ambitious person. I like to set goals. So if I just let go of needing things to go a certain way, does that mean I just give up?
Right.
Where's the line between, healthy striving and clinging?
It's a great question and a question that comes up a lot. And apranihita, it's not about becoming indifferent, right?
Right.
You can still have goals, desires, dreams. It's about experiencing those desires without being completely ruled by them.
Right.
Think of it like this. You can really want that promotion at work without, basing your entire happiness on getting it.
Oh, yeah, I feel that. That weight of expectation can be a lot sometimes. All right, well, are we ready to unlock the final door?
Let's do it.
Okay, so this one is sunnata, which is often translated as emptiness. I gotta say, that sounds even a little bit ominous, to be honest.
Yeah, you're not alone. Emptiness can definitely be a little misleading.
Yeah.
It's not about nothingness. It's about recognizing the interconnected and ever-changing nature of everything.
Okay.
Think of it like this. You're holding a glass of water, right? Seems pretty solid.
Yeah.
But if you could zoom in close enough, you'd just see all this swirling mass of molecules in constant flux. That impermanence, that interconnectedness, that's sunnata.
Wow. So by embracing that idea of constant change, of things not being fixed, we find liberation from the suffering of clinging to how we think things should be.
Exactly. It allows us to be more present, more accepting, and in the end, just more at peace with whatever life, throws our way.
It's amazing how these 3 doors, they offer such a different way of looking at things. It's incredible how those teachings from so long ago, they're still so incredibly relevant to us today.
They are. And, exploring these doors is a journey. It's not about, instant perfection or anything.
Right.
Start by simply noticing where you get stuck. Judgments, attachments, anxieties. And then, gently guide yourself back to this present moment. That's where liberation begins.
Wonderful.
And we're talking about Buddhist enlightenment,
Okay.
but we're kind of looking at it as the fast track version.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be exploring the 3 doors of liberation.
Sounds good.
And to do that, we've got a really fascinating mix of sources for this one.
Okay.
So we've got some traditional Buddhist texts, some commentaries that help break things down, and even a little excerpt from Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village website.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area of Buddhist thought. And I think what makes it so intriguing is that it really gets at the heart of how our perception shapes a reality.
Okay.
Our experience of the world around us.
So let's dive into doorway number 1, which is all about emptiness. Now, I love how the Plum Village piece kind of sets the scene for this one. Imagine yourself outside under a tree. You can feel the wind, hear the sounds around you. And if you really tune in, you can almost sense the tree itself growing, changing every second.
Right.
Now, think about how that applies to our internal world, our thoughts, our feelings. They're not so solid either, are they?
Yeah.
They're more like waves rising and falling.
That's a great way to put it, because emptiness in this context It isn't about nothingness, like you might first think when you hear that word.
Right.
It's about recognizing the impermanent nature of everything.
Yeah.
Our senses, thoughts, emotions, even consciousness itself. It's
Yeah.
in constant flux. It's constantly changing.
Okay.
And that image from Plum Village, that peaceful place under the tree, that represents the freedom that we can experience when we stop clinging to fixed ideas of how things should be.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not about erasing our thoughts or feelings, but it's more about changing how we relate to them.
Exactly, yeah. The first door of liberation, it invites us to become observers of that constant flow without getting swept away by it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that letting go that we start to glimpse true freedom.
That's a really powerful idea. But we've got 2 more doors to unlock, right?
Absolutely.
What's next?
So the second doorway, signlessness, this one takes us even deeper into how we perceive reality and maybe even challenges it a bit.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. Remember how the Plum Village excerpt, it talked about a child being completely connected to their surroundings, everything's intertwined?
Oh, right.
Well, the signless Buddha mindfulness, it takes this idea even further.
Yeah.
It poses this fascinating question. What if even language itself is just a product of our physical bodies? Like, if we didn't have bodies, would we even need words to describe things?
It's a mind-blowing concept, isn't it?
It is.
And that's precisely the territory this door opens.
Yeah, okay.
Signlessness is about recognizing that even labels, names, language, all of these things, these are constructs. They're helpful for navigating the world, of course, but they're not the world itself.
So if the first door is about letting go of clinging to how things should be, and the second is about letting go of labels, what's the third door about letting go of?
That's a great question. It leads us to the third doorway, which is often translated as wishlessness. But that word can be a little misleading.
Yeah, I can see how that might be a bit confusing.
It's not about suppressing desires, but more about cultivating a state of such deep concentration that distractions just kind of fall away.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about everything being in constant flux?
Yeah,
Well, this door challenges us to kind of find stillness amidst that flow.
that makes sense. Actually, now that you mention it, a lot of the sources we're diving into, they talk about the importance of concentration.
Right.
It reminds me of when you're trying to remember, like, a loved one you've lost.
Yeah.
You're not, repeating their name in your head, right?
Right.
It's more like you're holding this wordless feeling, this kind of deep, focused awareness. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
You're spot on, yeah. It's about training the mind to be so fully present that you're not being pulled in 1,000 different directions by every thought or desire or external stimulus.
So it's like all those stories you hear about, Buddhist masters meditating in caves for years.
Right.
You have to imagine that level of focus is incredibly intense.
Well, and our sources do offer some intriguing glimpses into that kind of practice. Yeah. There's the story of Master Huiyuan, who was a key figure in the development of Pure Land Buddhism.
Okay.
He practiced what's described as quieting thoughts and contemplating with single-minded focus.
Wow.
And as a result, he reported having visions of the Buddha.
Wow. So it's not just about zoning out. Like, deep concentration has the potential to unlock some really profound insights.
Exactly. And this brings us back to the idea of wishlessness, right? When the mind is truly focused, not constantly chasing desires or getting caught up in distractions,
Right.
that's when real wisdom can emerge.
Yeah.
Signless Buddha mindfulness, it actually describes a technique for cultivating this kind of focus.
Okay.
They call it writing the sounds and capping the forms.
Okay.
So imagine being aware of the sounds around you, but not getting caught up in them.
Yeah.
They're just there. They're just passing through.
Okay, I'm trying to picture that. So it's like those sounds become background music, but you're not really listening to the lyrics.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Okay.
And the capping the forms part, it's similar, but with visual stimuli,
Right.
It's not about blocking out the world,
Yeah.
but not getting lost in the details.
So these 3 doorways, emptiness, signlessness, and this deep, focused wishlessness, they're all connected, right? It's not like you unlock one and you're done.
You've hit the nail on the head, yeah.
Yeah.
They work together, each one deepening our understanding and experience of liberation. Emptiness helps us let go of attachment. Signlessness breaks down the illusion of labels. And this deep concentration allows us to see more clearly.
That makes sense, but how do we put this all into practice? It's one thing to, understand these 3 doorways, but how do we actually walk through them?
That's the heart of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that these aren't like steps to check off a list. but states of being to cultivate through practice.
Mm.
Signless Buddha mindfulness offers one technique.
Mm.
Master Huiyuan's practice is another example.
Right.
The key is finding what works for you, what helps you cultivate that deep, focused awareness.
It sounds like there isn't just one right way to approach this. It's about finding a path that resonates with you.
Exactly. And it's a lifelong journey. It's
Yeah.
not about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment overnight,
Right.
but continuously refining our understanding and experience of these three doors of liberation. It's about recognizing that the path to liberation isn't about escaping the world, but about transforming our relationship to it.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I feel like I'm starting to understand Buddhist enlightenment in a whole new way. But before we wrap up, I have to ask, our sources, they were all about Buddhist teachings.
Right.
How do these three doors of liberation actually connect to the concept of enlightenment itself? So we've explored these doorways, but how do they actually lead to enlightenment?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
And the exciting thing is, our sources don't just give us like a theoretical answer.
Right.
They offer these examples of how it unfolds in practice.
Okay, so it's less about intellectual understanding and more about lived experience.
Exactly, yeah. Like take Master Huiyuan, for instance.
Yeah.
Remember his practice of quieting his thoughts and that single-minded focus.
Right.
Essentially, he cultivated that deep concentration we were just talking about with the third door.
Right, and through that practice, he started having visions of the Buddha.
Exactly. Which points to a really profound shift in his consciousness,
Okay.
a glimpse beyond our ordinary everyday perception. It suggests that these doors, they don't magically transport you to enlightenment,
Right.
but they create the conditions for those deeper insights to occur.
So the doors are more like clearing a path, removing obstacles so that understanding can emerge.
Precisely. And Signless Buddha mindfulness touches on this beautifully. It says, knowing that all Buddhas and one's own mind are like dreams, that all Buddhas I see originate from my true mind.
So rather than seeking enlightenment out there somewhere, it's about recognizing something that's already within us.
That's the heart of it. The Source even refers to this as Buddha mindfulness in ultimate reality.
Okay.
This realization that enlightenment isn't separate from us, but it's part of our very nature, just waiting to be uncovered.
This is making me rethink what enlightenment even means, It's not some far-off goal, but something accessible right here, right now.
It really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it?
It does.
And the three doors of liberation provide a path to tap into that inherent Buddha nature, Emptiness. It helps us release our attachment to this fixed sense of self.
Right.
Signlessness helps us see through the illusion of labels and that deep, focused concentration.
It's like the key that unlocks it all.
Exactly. That focused state allows us to cut through those distractions, quiet the mind, and see clearly what's always been there.
Wow.
It's like finally tuning into a radio frequency that's always been broadcasting. We just needed the right receiver.
And we've talked about different paths to get there, whether it's writing the sounds and capping the forms, or Master Huiyuan's method of quieting thoughts. It seems like there isn't one right way to practice these teachings.
That's what's so exciting about it. It's not about these rigid rules,
right.
but it's about finding what works for you, what helps you cultivate that deep, focused awareness.
Yeah. Deep, deep, deep into the formless realms. You with me? Good, because these realms, they're not your average vacation destinations.
They're states of being so refined, so beyond physical form, that even calling them realms feels kind of clunky.
Exactly. It's like saying infinity plus one. How do you even picture that? But here's the thing. Buddhist texts, commentaries, even modern interpretations, they've got all these incredible descriptions, almost like a user manual for hacking consciousness. So let's start with Akasha the realm of infinite space.
Imagine stepping outside your concept of outside. No walls, no planets, not even a breath of air to give you a sense of scale. Just pure, unadulterated spaciousness.
Okay, I can kind of picture that in a trippy screensaver kind of way, but how does that translate to actual experience? Our sources mention something about a stretched bull hide.
Right, it's a classic analogy. Picture a hide all wrinkled and bumpy. As you stretch it tighter and tighter, those imperfections smooth out, right? Eventually, you're left with this perfectly even surface. That's what meditating on space is like. You let go of your attachment to individual forms, mountains, rivers, that annoying crack in your ceiling, until all that remains is the underlying canvas of space itself.
So it's not about finding more space, it's about realizing how much space was always there. We were just too busy focusing on the stuff in it.
Exactly. And even the way we think about space is limited. Theravada Buddhism, for example, differentiates between physical space, meditative space, and even conceptual space. Only the physical, the stuff we bump into, is considered truly subject to change.
Whoa. So the space we experience in deep meditation, it's not playing by the same rules as the physical world. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Because next, we're moving beyond space itself into Vijnanikayatana, the realm of infinite consciousness.
Okay, hold up. If I'm picturing infinite space, and then I take away the space, what's left? And where does me even fit into this whole picture?
That's the crux of it. Remember how we removed all the objects to perceive pure space? Now we're letting go of even the perception of space itself and focusing on the consciousness that was always there, perceiving it all.
So it's like zooming out from the map to see the whole picture, and then realizing the picture was always being viewed by something. We're zooming in on the viewer.
Exactly. And without the limitations of external objects, or even the concept of space itself, consciousness in this realm is experienced as boundless, limitless. You think finding a moment of peace in a silent room is tough. This makes that look like Times Square on New Year's Eve.
Okay, that's a lot to process. I can already feel my brain needing a nap, and we're only on realm 2 out of 4.
We're just getting started. But before we move on, think about this. If beings can exist in these realms for eons without any physical form, what does that tell us about the nature of life and death as we understand it?
Right. It's like our concept of those things is totally anchored to the physical. But if we can experience existence without a body, without even space, suddenly those givens don't seem so given anymore, do they? Right. I'm ready to keep peeling back the layers of reality. What's next on this formless adventure?
Buckle up, because we're about to dive even deeper into the rabbit hole of formlessness with Akinikanyakana, the realm of nothingness.
Okay, nothingness. We're not messing around anymore, are we? Does this mean even consciousness, that viewer we were talking about, even that goes away?
In a way, yes. This realm takes that stripping away to a whole new level. It's not just about letting go of physical forms or even the perception of space. It's about transcending the perception of consciousness itself. No thoughts, no feelings, no sense of self, just pure, unadulterated emptiness.
I don't know about you, but emptiness usually makes me think of an empty stomach. Not exactly a spiritual state. How do you even begin to wrap your head around experiencing nothing?
Think of it like this. Imagine a vast, empty expanse. No light, no darkness, no sound, no silence, not even a sense of I observing the emptiness. It's pure potentiality, free from all distinctions and limitations.
Okay, my brain just did the Windows shutdown sound. It's one thing to think about nothing in an abstract way, like, oh yeah, the universe is mostly empty space, but to actually experience it, that's wild. Our sources mention something about recognizing the emptiness inherent in all phenomena. What does that even mean in a practical sense?
It's like that aha moment when you realize your favorite coffee mug is really just a bunch of atoms arranged in a certain way temporarily. But even that realization, it's still a thought, a fleeting experience in the mind. The realm of nothingness goes beyond even those subtle perceptions, revealing the underlying emptiness that pervades all phenomena, all experiences.
You know, it's funny. This idea of nothingness reminds me a bit of what Plato was talking about with his theory of forms. He believed that the physical world was just a shadow play and that true reality existed in this realm of perfect, unchanging forms. It's like the Buddhists were having these deep existential conversations centuries before the likes of Plato or Aristotle even showed up.
What's fascinating is how these ancient philosophies from different corners of the world were grappling with similar questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the limitations of human perception. The concept of emptiness, for example, was a hot topic of debate among early Buddhist schools, much like the concept of being was debated in ancient Greece. It highlights the universality of these big philosophical questions and how they continue to resonate with us today.
It's like we're all just trying to make sense of this crazy thing called existence using whatever tools and concepts we have at our disposal. But speaking of tools and concepts, we're not done yet, are we? I hear there's another realm even more mind-blowing than the realm of nothingness.
Oh, absolutely. Just when you thought you'd reached peak mind-blown, there's one more layer to peel back. Nivasanyana, the realm of neither perception nor non-perception.
Okay, you officially win. The realm of neither perception nor non-perception. That's like saying, this pizza is both delicious and not delicious, but also it's not really pizza. My brain's about to start singing the alphabet backwards.
It's a mouthful, right? Even the ancient texts were like, good luck explaining this one. But here's the thing. It's not about adding more layers. It's about realizing that even the concept of layers is a construct.
All right, so less onion, more, like those Russian nesting dolls where you think you've hit the smallest one, but no key, there's a microscopic one inside.
Perfect analogy.
Right.
We've gone from infinite space to infinite consciousness to the very absence of both. Now we're recognizing that even those distinctions, perception, non-perception, they're still ideas, tools we use to make sense of experience. This realm transcends those tools completely.
So how is it even possible to talk about, let alone experience, something that's beyond perception? It's like trying to describe a new color that no one's ever seen before.
That's where those similes from our sources come in handy. Remember the one about the monk and the novice looking at a bowl of oil and water? The novice sees two distinct things, but the monk, with his deeper understanding, doesn't cling to those labels. He sees the underlying reality, the interplay of elements, without getting caught up in the designations.
So it's not that those labels are wrong, it's that they're incomplete. Like, calling a symphony organized noise isn't technically false, but you're missing the whole point.
Precisely. This realm is about recognizing the limitations of even our most fundamental concepts, while still acknowledging their practical use in navigating the world. It's a delicate balance, like walking a tightrope between understanding and experience.
Okay, my mind is officially blown, but let's bring this back down to earth for a second. Let's say, hypothetically, someone manages to be reborn into one of these formless realms. Is that a good thing?
It's a tricky question. On one hand, these realms offer unimaginable peace and tranquility, freedom from the suffering that comes with clinging to form. But,
There's always a but.
well, imagine getting so comfortable in a luxurious waiting room that you forget you had somewhere to be. The formless realms are incredibly refined, but they're still part of the cycle of existence. The true aim of Buddhist practice is to go beyond even these subtle states, to achieve nirvana, complete liberation, the ultimate escape from the hamster wheel of rebirth.
So it's less about reaching the best realm and more about realizing that any realm, even one of pure bliss, is still just a temporary state.
Exactly. The formless realms are like stepping stones, helping us refine our understanding, loosen our grip on the illusion of self, and prepare for that ultimate leap into liberation. So to really get a handle on signlessness, we got to go back to the source, right?
Of course, yeah.
Imagine you're in ancient India. You're listening in on this chat from the Animitta Sutta.
Oh, wow.
It's between the Buddha and one of his most advanced students, Moggallana.
And just to highlight, this wasn't just any student.
Right.
Moggallana was known for his meditation skills.
Yeah.
Like, he was advanced, and even he had trouble with signlessness at first.
It's so interesting, right?
Yeah.
It shows you this isn't just like a Buddhism 101 concept.
Right.
This is deep, this is challenging even for those really experienced meditators.
Yeah.
So in the sutta, Moggallana goes directly to the Buddha for guidance.
Makes sense.
It's kind of like going to like the Einstein of your field when you can't figure out the equation.
Right.
And the Buddha gives him this advice, and it's really powerful.
Okay.
He says it's not about just getting rid of signs completely.
Interesting, because that word signs in this context,
Yeah, what does it mean?
it means everything we experience.
Okay.
Sights, sounds, thoughts, emotions. It's anything our mind kind of grabs onto.
Like when you get a new car and suddenly you notice every little thing.
Yes.
Every like little scratch every time someone like parks too close in the parking lot.
Exactly.
You're just so aware of it.
And the Buddha is telling Moggallana, it's totally natural to notice those things,
Okay.
but it's that clinging to them,
Right.
that attachment that really is the root of suffering.
So it's not like shutting those things out completely. It's how you react to them.
That's it.
So what happens with Moggallana? Does he get it?
Well, with the Buddha's help,
Right.
he finally starts to grasp this idea of signlessness.
And the text actually says he felt this huge feeling of relief.
Yeah, like a weight was lifted because
Yeah.
he was carrying around this burden and he didn't even realize it. And I think that's so important for us listening today, right?
Yeah.
Because we all have those burdens that we're lugging around.
That's very true.
Mm.
It's amazing to think about, you know, Moggallana's journey to understanding this. It's like a powerful lesson for us today. And modern Buddhist practitioners, they've taken this ancient wisdom
Right.
and really looked at how it applies in our everyday lives.
And it's amazing how it's not just stuck back in those old texts. You know,
That's
it's
correct.
something that's still alive and being explored today.
One article I saw, Signlessness,
Mm-hmm.
Significance and Symbolism,
Okay.
talking about how it goes beyond just meditation, you know.
Right.
It affects how we see ourselves, our relationships, even like reality itself.
Exactly. And this article draws on Mahayana Buddha thought
Okay.
to show how signlessness can help us break free from like the grip of ego.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's not getting caught up in I am this or I am that,
Right.
but seeing beyond those labels.
Yeah. And it leads to this recognition that we're all connected.
Right.
You know, it's like signlessness takes away the blinders
Yeah.
and shows us we're part of something so much bigger than just ourselves.
That's got to be freeing, but could it be confusing too?
In what way?
Like, if you're not supposed to cling to signs, what about things like intuition or gut feelings?
Right.
I even saw this whole debate about it on Stack Exchange.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good point. And it highlights where people can get tripped up.
Okay.
Signlessness doesn't mean you ignore information or you become numb to the world.
So you're not just walking around like you're in a daze oblivious.
No, not at all. One of the answers on Stack Exchange explained it really well.
What'd they say?
They said, it's about shifting your internal relationship to the information, not pretending it's not there.
Okay, that's interesting.
So instead of getting stuck on just one interpretation of something, you learn to hold things a bit more loosely.
Okay.
You realize that your interpretations are just that
Right.
they're not the absolute truth.
And that's probably why this is still something people are talking about today, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like I was on that Dhamma Wheel forum and people are going back and forth about how to actually live with signlessness.
It's not just some theory. It's about how do we bring this into our lives.
Exactly.
And that's what's so great about this deep dive today.
Yeah.
It's not just us, thinking about this as some intellectual exercise. It's an invitation to really engage with this idea, to see how it might change our lives.
So much to think about with signlessness.
It really is a rich concept.
It is. Before we go, though,
Yeah.
how do we bring this all back to the listener at home?
Okay.
If they're thinking, all right, this is all interesting, but like, what's in it for me?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. What would you tell them?
Well, I'd ask them to think about how often they label their experiences.
Right.
Good, bad, exciting, boring,
All the time.
Our minds are constantly categorizing things.
Totally.
And the thing is, those labels, those judgments,
Yeah.
they hold a lot of power over us.
I could see that.
They fuel our attachments, our dislikes, all that stuff we struggle with.
So is signlessness about like making those thoughts go silent?
Not exactly.
No. Okay.
It's more about shifting how we relate to those thoughts.
Okay.
We can notice the labels, but we don't let them control how we feel.
So it's not like I have to pretend I don't have those thoughts.
Exactly.
It's just I can choose how I react.
You got it.
Like when you finally stop overthinking and just let yourself experience something
Yeah.
without all that mental chatter.
That's a great way to put it. And,
Yeah.
it ties right back to that idea of non-abiding we talked about earlier.
Right.
Signlessness helps us be present,
Okay.
more adaptable to whatever life throws at us.
Which is a pretty good skill to have these days.
Tell me about it.
Right.
These teachings on signlessness weren't meant to be just abstract ideas.
Right.
They were tools.
Yeah.
Tools to help us navigate life's challenges and find some peace within.
And who couldn't use a little more of that, right?
Right. So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want you to think about what really stood out to you today
Okay.
and how you could maybe bring a little bit of signlessness into your own life.
Even if it's just small steps.
Absolutely. Small steps lead to big changes.
It's a great point.
It's this idea of finding contentment, real peace, by embracing this aimlessness.
Aimlessness.
I know, right? Sounds a little counterintuitive, especially in our world where we're constantly told to hustle and have a plan and all that. But that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're really going to dig into the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh.
No, Tan.
Exactly. We've got some really powerful excerpts from his work that explore this whole concept of aimlessness, this core Buddhist principle, and how it totally applies to our modern lives, even with all the, the chaos and the to-do lists. And, well, help us unpack all this, I've got our expert here.
Happy to be here. I'm really excited to dive into this. Nichiren Library has this way of presenting these really deep, almost radical ideas, but in a way that just makes so much sense.
Totally. Okay, so to kick things off, there's this almost jarring contrast, I guess you could say, that Nhat Hanh highlights between how, we're supposed to approach life in the West, all goal-oriented, always striving, future-focused,
right,
versus this Buddhist idea of apranihita. It's often translated as wishlessness or even aimlessness, which, honestly, at first glance, those words can feel a little intimidating, don't they?
It's definitely a concept that kind of shakes up our usual way of thinking, because it's easy to hear aimlessness and picture someone just floating through life with zero ambition, just hoping for the best, right?
Right.
But that's not what Nhat Hanh is getting at. He's not suggesting we become, passive observers in our own lives. It's more about shifting our relationship to our goals.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going with this. So instead of being so laser focused on the finish line, on that future point of success, it's more about like being fully present for each step along the way.
Exactly. Imagine instead of just, racing towards the destination, you're actually enjoying the journey itself.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties into contentment. It's like that classic saying, right? Stop and smell the roses.
Exactly. And it's not just about roses, right? It's about finding joy and contentment in the doing in the present moment, whatever that looks like for you.
That makes me think of that fantastic quote from Nhat Hanh. Don't just do something, sit there.
Right.
I mean, talk about a thought-provoking reversal. It's hilarious, but it also really makes you think. What's your take on the power of stillness, especially in a culture that prizes busyness above all else?
It's so true. Like, we wear our busyness as a badge of honor almost.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating how often we equate stillness, just being, with like laziness, even guilt.
Yeah.
Like, we should be doing something productive at all times.
Oh, 100%.
But as Nhat Hanh so wisely points out, choosing to stop, to just be present, that's not about like shutting down. If anything, it's about waking up. It's in those quiet moments that we can actually connect with ourselves on a deeper level. And ultimately, that awareness, that connection, that's where true well-being begins.
That really resonates with me. I know I often feel that pressure to constantly be on, always checking things off that to-do list. And even when I do manage to like carve out some downtime, there's this voice whispering, shouldn't you be getting something done?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like this constant pressure, right? And it's something so many of us struggle with. But what I find so compelling about Nhat Hanh's teachings is that he gives us permission to reframe those moments of, quote unquote, doing nothing. He sees them as a practice in themselves. It's not about escaping from life, but about engaging with it in a more mindful way.
So how do we actually, start to cultivate that sense of enoughness that Nhat Hanh talks about? Because he talks about this practice of Tritek. What can you tell us about that?
So Tritek is all about recognizing that we already have enough. And it's interesting, this concept, while it's often associated with Buddhism, it actually comes from Confucius originally.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it speaks to like the universality of this human need, this yearning to just like feel content, to feel complete.
Which, on the surface, seems so simple, right? Like, of course I have enough.
But then reality sets in.
Exactly.
And it can be so challenging to really embody that sense of enoughness. And it's not just about material possessions either. Though, let's be honest, that's often where our minds go first, right?
Oh, for sure.
But it's about looking at those deeper needs,
Yeah.
the emotional, the spiritual. That's often where we feel that sense of lack, that not enoughness.
You like that feeling of, I'll be happy when, and we fill in the blank with some achievement or something we think we need.
Yes. And Nhat Hanh challenges us to ask, what if true happiness isn't about getting more, but about really appreciating what we already have? What if contentment isn't a destination, but a state of being that's available to us right now?
Yeah, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This idea that maybe contentment isn't about chasing some future state, but about really being present with the fullness of what's already here. I do want to shift gears just a bit here, though, and touch on something Nhat Hanh talks about that's always struck me as incredibly powerful, even if it can be a little heavy at times. He talks about finding value in unexpected places, even in experiences like sickness, even death.
It's true. He doesn't shy away from the difficult aspects of life, does he?
Not at all. Why do you think he was so drawn to these more challenging themes?
Well, I think for Nhat Hanh, instead of fearing these experiences like sickness, loss, death, he saw them as opportunities, opportunities for growth, for transformation.
Yeah.
A bit like, and this might seem strange, but a bit like a forest fire.
A forest fire.
Yeah, he uses this analogy. On the surface, a fire, it's destructive,
Right.
But it's also essential for new life. It clears away the old, makes space for the new to emerge. And so he saw these difficult experiences, death, loss, even sickness, as natural parts of the cycle of life. Not things to be feared or avoided, but to be, understood, appreciated even, for their role in renewal, in change.
That is a powerful way of looking at it. And it's not just theoretical for Nhat Hanh either. He talks about people who found profound meaning and even deeper appreciation for life through their experiences with illness.
Absolutely. He talks about Sister Annabelle, who observed that, often when people are facing a serious illness, they come out on the other side with this incredible gratitude for life, a deeper understanding of themselves, of what really matters.
It's a good reminder for all of us, I think. Even in the midst of difficult times, there's always something to be learned, always potential for growth, if we're open to it.
And maybe even more importantly, it's our perception of those experiences, how we choose to relate to them. Are we approaching them with resistance, or are we, leaning into acceptance?
Man, there's so much to unpack here already, and honestly, we've only just scratched the surface.
I know. And believe it or not, we're just getting started.
Okay, so before we go any further, I want to loop back to something you mentioned earlier about how our inability to just switch off, to just be, might actually be rooted in something much deeper, much older than ourselves.
Yes.
You had me at deeper and older. Tell me more about this habit energy and how it plays into everything we've been talking about.
So Nate Hattie explains it like this. We inherit not just, physical traits from our ancestors, but also patterns of consciousness, ways of thinking, ways of reacting to the world that have been passed down through generations, like echoes of those who came before us.
So you're saying, like, my tendency to, I don't know, overthink every little thing that could be genetic, inherited.
Well, maybe not genetic in the strictest sense, but certainly inherited through this web of consciousness that connects us. It's fascinating, right?
Totally. Keep going.
Think about it. For most of human history, survival depended on constant vigilance, always being on guard for danger. You had to be ready to fight or flee at a moment's notice. And that kind of hyper-awareness, it gets embedded in our very being, passed down through families, through cultures, over millennia.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's like we're hardwired for a world that doesn't really exist anymore, at least not for most of us. I mean, our ancestors were out there dodging saber-toothed tigers, and here we are stressing about deadlines and overflowing inboxes.
Exactly. And those instincts, they served a purpose back then, right?
Yeah.
But in our modern world, they often manifest as anxiety, restlessness, that inability to relax, to just be present.
Okay, so this is blowing my mind a little. Are you saying it's not just me being, like, bad at meditation, but, like, literally millennia of evolutionary programming I'm up against here?
Let's not call it bad at meditation. It's more about recognizing those ingrained patterns and learning to work with them, with compassion, with understanding.
Okay, I can get behind that.
And to illustrate this, Nathan tells this really powerful story about this young boy. And he's constantly on the receiving end of his father's anger.
Oh, right. The one with the angry father. That one really stuck with me.
Boy's just trying to navigate childhood, but it seems like everything makes his father angry. Things he can't even control, like tripping and falling.
And it's not until later, after the boy has spent some time at Plum Village, learning these mindfulness practices, that he has this, like, profound realization.
He does.
He realizes that his own anger, the anger that he feels toward his father, is like an echo of his father's anger, passed down through who knows how many generations.
And most importantly, he realizes he has the power to break that cycle, that he doesn't have to be a prisoner to these inherited patterns. He can choose a different path.
Which is such a powerful message when you really think about it. And it kind of drives home this point that mindfulness isn't just about, individual peace. It has these ripple effects. Like, by transforming our own consciousness, we impact the people around us, maybe even future generations.
Exactly. And if we connect this back to Nat Han's teachings on aimlessness, it's not about resigning ourselves to the way things are. It's about recognizing those patterns, the personal ones, the collective ones that no longer serve us. And then, consciously choosing to engage with life from a more aware, more compassionate place.
So less about erasing ambition altogether and more about maybe, like, redirecting it.
Yes.
Instead of chasing those fleeting desires, those things we think will finally make us happy, we're cultivating qualities that lead to more lasting peace, more lasting fulfillment.
Precisely. It's about aligning our actions with our deepest values, which, and I think Nat Hannah would agree, those values are ultimately about love, compassion, and connection.
Which brings us beautifully to this idea of coming home to ourselves through mindfulness, finding that sense of belonging, not in some physical place, but within our own being.
I love that imagery.
Me too.
Nat Han links this directly to the Brahma Viharas. Are you familiar?
Oh, I've heard of them.
The four immeasurables: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. They're like these qualities of the heart of the mind that are said to be boundless, always available to us, no matter what's happening externally. And he suggests that cultivating these qualities within ourselves and in our interactions with the world, that's how we create that sense of home wherever we go.
Instead of searching for happiness in those external achievements,
Yeah.
or possessions, we're tapping into a wellspring of joy that's already present. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And it is a radical idea, in a world that's constantly telling us we need more. We need to do more, be more, to be worthy of love, of belonging.
It's radical, but also incredibly freeing, don't you think?
It is. And look, it's not easy. This is an ongoing practice. It takes dedication. It takes a willingness to show up for ourselves, for our lives in a new way. But the rewards, as Nodhana describes them, are immeasurable.
So well said. And to bring us full circle, it sounds like that's really what this whole idea of aimlessness is all about. It's not about being passive. It's not about resigning ourselves to, mediocrity. It's about letting go of that rigid attachment to specific outcomes, and opening ourselves up to something much greater, much more fulfilling.
The Plum Village motto kind of sums it up perfectly. I have arrived. I am home. It's such a statement of presence, of recognizing that everything we need for true happiness, for a life of meaning, it's already within us, right here, right now.
I love that. I love that a lot.
So ready to invite a little more of that aimlessness into our lives. Because that's what we're going to look at now, right? How do we actually do that?
Well, I have to admit, even after all that, it still feels, I don't know, a little funny to talk about, like bringing aimlessness into our lives. Most of us, we've got places to be, things to do. So how do we even begin?
Right, like the word itself kind of goes against everything we're taught, But remember, it's not about like throwing out your goals or anything.
Yeah.
It's more about shifting our focus a bit. Instead of always chasing after those future outcomes, it's about those moments of peace, of presence, right here and now.
Okay, yeah.
And this shift, believe it or not, Nada says it can start with something as simple as the breath.
Ah, the breath, of course, right? Like the foundation of so many mindfulness practices. But how does something as, I don't know, as everyday as breathing, how does that connect to this idea of aimlessness?
It's about bringing your attention to your breath, not trying to like force it or change it in any way, not needing it to do anything for you, just noticing the natural rhythm, the inhale, the exhale, that gentle rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. It's a way of grounding yourself in the present moment. Even if it's just for a few breaths. It's like hitting the pause button on that hamster wheel in our minds, all those racing thoughts, all the things we think we need to do.
It sounds so simple, and yet, speaking from experience here, quieting that mental chatter, it can be a lot harder than it sounds.
Yeah, especially when we're so used to like going all the time. And that's actually where the aimlessness comes in, when we let go of that need to like achieve something with our breath, to reach some perfectly still meditative state, It frees us from that pressure. It creates space to just be, to notice our thoughts, our feelings, without getting swept away by them.
So it's more about befriending our minds than like wrestling them into submission. I like that.
Exactly. And from that place of acceptance, from that awareness, we can start to make more conscious choices about how we're showing up in the world. We can start to see those patterns, those habits that might be keeping us stuck.
And from that place of awareness, we can make different choices that are more in line with that feeling of peace, of contentment.
You got it. And those choices, they're going to look different for everyone. Maybe for you, it's carving out some time each day for stillness, for reflection, or maybe it's about bringing more presence to those everyday things, enjoying a meal, going for a walk, even like washing the dishes.
Yeah. Finding those little pockets of presence in the midst of all the busyness.
Yes. Those moments where we can just reconnect with ourselves, reconnect with that enoughness that Narayan talks about.
So good.
And it's not like a one-time thing, of course. It's an ongoing practice, continually returning to ourselves, to that peace, that wisdom that's always there.
Yeah.
And returning again when we drift away, because, we all do.
Oh, yeah. Life has a way of pulling us in all directions.
Always.
Yeah.
But with each mindful breath, each moment of awareness, we're building that resilience.
Right.
We're cultivating that ability to navigate, all of it with a little more grace.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation, really. I feel like I have, I don't know, a whole new perspective on mindfulness, on contentment, even on ambition, honestly.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah.
And for you listening, I hope this has, sparked your curiosity.
Right.
To explore this idea of aimlessness in your own life.
Yes, I love that.
Why not start small? Set aside a few minutes each day to just be. Notice what comes up. without judgment. See what you discover.
What a great place to leave it. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.